Hey, everybody. We had a question in chat about, or at least a request for comment about the fact that the crafting wildcard nature of Arena creates a flat price for rares and what the impact of that is on game design decisions and the economy and all of that. So I thought I'd speak to that for a second. I was on the team when we were working through what our crafting system was going to be. And so for starters, we had some goals there. And one of the early goals that I laid out after talking with Eric Lauer a bit about crafting systems in like Hearthstone and whatnot is the practice of destroying cards to get crafting material. The Hearthstone model, the dust model. And the major problem with the dust model is that it puts people in a mindset about cards in their collection that you really don't want to do. It encourages people to think about what cards to destroy, and it encourages them and kind of forces people to spend time thinking about that. I was on the systems design side of things on Arena when I was on the team, so I was looking at everything around the battlefield. I didn't really touch the battlefield, but I had a lot of impact and input around what was going on in the ancillary systems going on besides gameplay. And my philosophy about these non-battlefield gameplay systems is that you want players to be in them as little as possible. You want the majority of player time to be spent on the battlefield playing a game of Magic or drafting cards. And if they're languishing in deck building and crafting and all of that, then you're making a mistake, because it's not really the fun part for the vast majority of players. Of course, there's something for somebody out there is going to find anything to be the most fun, but the vast majority of players are not interested in micromanaging their card economy to get the crafting material they need for a card they want. So first thing on the block was the dusting system on the chopping block, saying we don't want people destroying their cards to be able to make new cards. Another reason for that is like newer players don't understand what's valuable or not. You know how hard it is for a new Magic player to look at a field of rares and decide which ones are worth blowing up for dust and which ones are worth keeping. That's the kind of thing that sends new players to Reddit. And another one of my philosophies is, don't have systems that send players to Reddit. They send players out of your game to understand what to do. And you could argue that happens with Mastery Pass even, but I would say at least that's a one-time thing. The ongoing need to decide what to destroy was just a non-starter for us. That was met somewhat controversially. Like, a lot of people have a feeling like, but now I don't get value out of my cards. I have these cards in my collection I don't care about, and I can't get value from them. But that expectation is only there because of games like Hearthstone, because of the way that other products have set up the expectation for that value, and even for Magic as a whole. Obviously, when you go buy a physical booster pack at a store, you expect to be able to do something with those cards after and have value from it. So I understand that both the paper game and competitors like Hearthstone set up the Magic community to expect value, post value out of their digitally open Magic cards, and we knew that was going to be a hearts and minds battle that we had to face, but we decided it was important enough to face that battle, face that blowback, because of how important we felt it was to not have new players have to figure out what cards to destroy to get what they want. And the result is this system in which effectively you can think of wild cards and the way that they come out of packs as pre-dusting of your cards. Like, you're already getting, that value you're seeking, that value that people want out of dusting their cards is pre-granted by the wildcard system. So at the end of the day, whether it's dust or whether it's the wildcard system or whatever, the fundamental question most constructed heavy players have is, how much is it going to cost me in dollars to make the deck I want? And when you frame it that way, then it really doesn't matter whether it's wild cards or dust. The fundamental question is, how much does it cost for me to have this deck? And so that was a big focus of considerations on the economy team. Like, how much does it cost? How much do we want a tier 1 standard deck to cost? we would look at previous top decks from Standard and ask ourselves how much they would cost to craft under any given system. And of course, it's wildly variant. You have your bargain decks, your mono red decks, or whatever, your mono blue decks back in the, a year ago or so, that were really inexpensive in terms of rares and mythics. And then you had heavy, 3-color, heavy rare mana base type decks and heavy mythics that are just chock full of rares and mythics that have a completely different cost. So that in itself is a wild enough range of what a deck can cost. But the thing that was asked about that led me to want to have this discussion here is another consequence of the wild card system we landed on, though, even though it doesn't ask players to destroy cards, what it does do is says on Arena, all mythics are worth the same, all rares are worth the same, all uncommons are worth the same, and all commons are worth the same. It's all worth the same because you're just using, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a junk rare or the best rare in the set. A rare wild card is a rare wild card. And R&D pushed back on this system pretty hard, saying it has a major problem, and that's the problem that was brought up. By having a flat economy in rare and mythic, you reduce the amount of brewing, the amount of casual decks that are even going to appear in your meta. Because if you are someone who's trying to play free to play, and you only have the wild cards to make like 1, maybe 2 decks by the end of a given set cycle, are you going to squander your rares on some lowly but fun build around that's just not competitive? Or are you going to get your Okos and your Golden Gooses and your Wolves, right? That's where people are going to do. People are going to largely spend their rare and mythic wild cards on the corresponding paper rares and mythics that are the most dominant and most expensive. And that really does harm the amount of brewing that you see on Arena, because people just don't want to use their rares on bulk rares, their wild cards on bulk rares. Whereas in paper, snapping up bulk rares and making fun decks with them is a major part of the spread of the economy the game represents. One of my favorite Magic jokes is, hey, how much does Magic cost? How much you got? Right? And of course, the idea being Magic will consume as many monetary resources as you're willing to throw at it. But I think the flip side of that joke is that you can answer 0. I have no money to spend on Magic, and that you can still play, right? As Arena proves. But part of the beauty of that range of cost is that players can get their hands on rares for a bargain, but there are no bargains on Arena. And we talked, so the question is that a problem worth designing around, worth solving in some way? And I think the answer might just be no. Like, I haven't seen that much of a problem. At the lower levels of play, I still see a lot of variety. I still see players doing a lot of wacky things with fun builds. So if it were Oko top to bottom at every step of the rung of the ladder right now, I would think it may demonstrate that it's a problem. But I think the desire Magic players have for variety somewhat trumps the concern about the lack of a budget deck on Arena, and also partly because Arena is budget. Like, you can get with heavy daily play and completing all your quests and grinding all your gold, you can get an Oko deck for like $0, right? So there's a way in which the game is already budget, and so players are willing to, it looks like, spend a little bit to do that. One of the things that Wizards could do to mitigate the problem, though, is like, let's go to something like this. They could have a format that rewarded 4X's of lowly, less used rares. Like, you could find a way to reward, use your own data to understand what players aren't crafting, what rares and mythics are not being crafted by players, and actually offer them as prizes in less costed events, or we don't care if players have 4 of these. So there are some systems and some events you could set up that help put bargain rares in the hands of players in an effort to encourage them to do some more creative brewing. But I think it's not proven itself to be a major problem yet. I don't know. Anybody disagree with me? I feel like I don't. I mean, even in this Oko fall, or whatever you want to call it, where at the highest levels of the game, you're crazy if you don't play the food deck. At the mid and low levels of Arena, I see plenty of variety. I almost rarely face the Oko deck, honestly, down at in this kind of silver gold level of casual play. So that was one way to solve it. And then Mama gets to the other point, like, sorry if I missed this, but was trading ever considered? I can trade cards on Pokemon TCG Online, so I was just curious. Trading was considered, but it's a significant feature, right? It's a really significant feature to add, and yeah, they could, if you put in trading, it complicates things incredibly on the economic front, on predicting player behavior. And so there are definitely solutions in terms of what the secondary market looks like on Arena that you could fix it with, and trading is one of those. But it's ultimately a decision point we had to hit and make a call on, and we just didn't go that direction. So anyway, I did want to acknowledge that the way that things landed on Arena, and it's a problem on Hearthstone too. Anything that offers a crafting system that levels out all rares and mythics as even is something you could that's going to have this problem. Oh, like, and here's a suggestion we had. You could say, you could have imagine instead of wild cards, it was a dust system, and even if you don't destroy stuff for dust, like whatever, the point is you get 20,000 dust, and then how do you spend it? You could have a secondary market that used an algorithm to look at ongoing popularity of crafting and have things lower their crafting cost and raise their crafting cost according to fluctuations in the market. And that can sound appealing on one level, like, oh yeah, it would actually kind of reflect the real world marketplace and have, but you got to make sure, you got to ask yourself, do I really want to introduce that into my system? Because again, it changes player behavior and it creates another game. I talked earlier about how, like, one of my goals for looking at systems on Arena was how to keep people out of my systems, how to keep you playing and drafting as much as possible. And the second that we introduce a system where the value of cards fluctuates, you now have a major new thing to think about. Are you sure you want to be thinking about that? There's something very nice about knowing that at all times, you know exactly what it's going to cost to make a mythic, exactly what's going to cost in terms of your resources to make a rare. Would you actually like it if Brazen Borrower were a 2,000 dust mythic today, but if tomorrow it could be 1,500 or it could be 2,500? Do you want to craft that borrower today? You are setting players up for regret. Almost any crafting system does set up a player with some regret, but if you introduce a complex system to recreate the feeling of a rising and falling secondary market value of cards, while perhaps realistic feeling, it may be a part of reality that you don't actually want to inject into this game and actually have players thinking about. So I think I don't like the solutions that involve complicating the economy and creating super complicated and possibly regret either way type decisions. Well, I could regret it if I buy it. I could regret it if I don't buy it. That is not something I would want players' heads to be thinking about. And I would much rather keep a simple system like the wild card system that doesn't ask players to think about what to destroy and doesn't ask players to decide whether they're going to buy today or tomorrow and which is going to be better, and instead come up with some systems that distribute the low wild card use rares and mythics into player accounts so that they are encouraged to brew a little bit. Of course, the problem with that too is that with rare protection, any rare is a good rare if it fills up to your 4x and helps make it give you a wider range of what you're going to open out of your packs. So that has problems for Wizards too. If they lower the price of any given rare or give away rares because of the flatness of it, it's like in the same way that when we rare draft, any rare feels like 20 gems or whatever. No matter how discounted they make a given rare, it is still progress towards your 4x, which they have to consider in the economic calculations. So it's a complicated topic on how to allow players in a digital collectible card game, how you allow players to acquire the cards they want that they don't have. And like a lot of design questions, there's not a perfect right answer. There's a bunch of trade-offs that you ask yourself about and decide what kind of experience you want your players to have. And then you monitor closely how they're behaving and how they're responding and make adjustments accordingly. So that's my spiel on that. I'll take a quick look for any follow-up questions, but I thought I would speak to that since it came up in chat.